This is week 3 of the winter trimester of 2018. Monday, with my figure painting, I work on unifying the light shape, work on unifying the shadow shape, and work on the transitions between the light shape and the shadow shape. Tuesday, Magda talks to me about unifying the big shadow shape even more. So I have the shadow shape that's on the figure, and then the background is fairly dark, so that I can unify with the shadow shape on the figure and call the whole background and shadow on the figure the whole shadow shape, that whole big shape. So before I had some variation in the background a little bit. I think it's probably how I'm applying the paint. Maybe I was doing it quickly and not so carefully, but there is variation in the background, but I wasn't doing it subtly enough. So you saw a lot of information that was in the background, a lot of information that was in the shadow shape, and then a lot of information in the light shape. And so what I really want to do is have a nice atmospheric, unified, big shadow shape, so all the attention is on the light shape that's on the figure. So I do that by, so I work on the background and the shadow shape that's on the figure to make sure that it's unified, and if there is variation in it, which there is in some spots, that it's very subtle. And at the end of the day, what I started working on was the blue robe and Jamie's blue hair. And the hair, there is some light catching the hair, but mostly the hair is in the shadow shape and the robe is mostly in the shadow shape as well. But I want to be bringing my painting every time that I'm working on it closer and closer to resolving it. So I add more blue and brighten it up, because it does need to be brightened up a little bit, but I'm being careful and trying to do it subtly so it's not distracting, because it is in the shadow shape. So what I'm doing is I'm painting the robe in a different way than I'm painting the figure, which is fun. I'm painting it very directly, so I have a few mixtures. I have the main blue, or like the lightest blue, and then a darker blue, and then a shadow, like really deep shadow color of blue. And so as I'm applying the paint, will paint one brush stroke down, and I step back into my spot and I look at the stroke and decide if I like it or not. And so if I like it, I leave it, and then if I don't, I'll go up and modify an edge or redo the stroke or do another stroke beside it. But what I'm doing is not blurring the paint around. I'll just put a stroke down and then step back and see how that affected the impression of the whole area from that one paint stroke. And so that's been a whole lot of fun to do. It's fun because it's really active. I'm moving around a lot, going back and forth from my easel and seeing how every little thing that I do is affecting the big impression. And I think this is good too, because I don't want the robe to be getting too much attention, which I think it could, because it is an intense color, but I want the focus to be on Jamie, not the robe that she's sitting on. So I think that it keeps me in a good headspace not to get zeroed in on that one area, but keep stepping back and seeing how it's affecting the whole impression of the big painting. On Wednesday, I mostly start working on the light shape of the figure, and so right away I see that I need to make the face and the lower legs, they're a lot more purple and a little bit of a deeper, richer color than what I have. So I go ahead and I paint that. I'm using a lot of similar colors in those two areas, and then I'm seeing that I can really brighten the big light shape of Jamie up. So I go to try and find the biggest, brightest plane, which is on the side of her and her breast, and I brighten that up. And there's also a part on her shoulder, so the top part of her shoulder, that's really bright, and it does have a really strong highlight on it, but I'm really trying to resist, because I've learned from other paintings to resist putting that highlight on until I make sure that the form that's under the highlight, so the form of the shoulder, is the right drawing value and color, so it all makes sense. And then later on, once I'm sure everything's working together, then I'll put that highlight on. And so because I'm brightening up the figure, I also need to brighten up the robe a little bit. So I do everything that I did the day before. So I make up my mixtures and I'm painting really directly with just putting a brush stroke down and leaving it. And this is getting a cool effect because I have the brush strokes down from the day before and then what I just added. So it's getting this nice kind of woven layered look to it. Now Thursday, my figure was looking a bit too yellow or orange, and it was a cloudy, or no, it wasn't a cloudy day, it was a really bright sunny day, so everything counterintuitive was pretty gray. So I see Jamie in life and she looks really gray, but I don't really know how to, I guess, push my painting out of this like yellowy orangey stage because I'm just seeing gray colors, and so I didn't want to gray her down too much. So Matt was helping me out and saying that I should then push for the complements of the yellows and orange. So I had my mixtures and I leaned them more towards greens and blues, and so I applied those in the lights, and it helped a lot to balance the figure out and getting a better range of color that makes more sense. So on Thursday, I got a really nasty cold, and Friday was the worst day, so I wasn't able to come into the studio, which sucks, but at least it's the end of the week, so I had the weekend to rest up. But now onto my still life. So some people have been asking about the light setup that I used, and for in the model room, over the model, the model's lit from a skylight, and so it's all from natural light. And the same for my still life, it's lit from a skylight, but I also will tape up foam cord boards or cardboard or whatever I have so I can get shadows to fall around my still life setup or sometimes on objects so I can soften an edge, and it just helps to control the light so I can get the light to behave exactly how I want it to. Okay, so this still life, it's been giving me problems because of the bottle, and the bottle is glass, but there is like all this dust and grime on it, so it's not clean, clear glass. And I haven't been like how I've been painting it and how it's been turning out. I even went in over the weekend and I repainted the bottle again, and still I'm not liking how it's turning out. So Monday, I'm waiting for Matt to come by for my critique so I can ask him again how I should be painting this, and I start with these big planes of the bottle, and the problem is, so I'll get the big planes, but then it won't look like that bottle because there's so much grime and dust and crap that's all over the planes of it, that when I try and paint that in to give it that look of a dirty bottle, I'll either break up the planes too much, and so there won't be any solidity to the bottle, or the other way where the planes are too clean, and then it doesn't look like that dirty bottle. And so when Matt came by for my critique, I feel like I just exploded on him with all this frustration, explaining that like I can't figure out how to paint this bottle right. And so he was telling me to do this thing that we do with our hands. So like you make two circles and you hold one up to whatever you're painting, like the actual still life. And you hold it up to there, and then you hold it up to a section in your still life in the same part. So like maybe like the top of the bottle of the still life, top of the bottle in my painting, and you compare the two. And he was like, you should be doing that or be using your cards to get it so you're working on more specific areas. Because he's saying like it's like you start off getting the big planes, but then since this bottle is so complicated, you got to be working, break it down into smaller areas that can be really critical about seeing where you can shift either the value or the color to get it to be what it actually looks like in that smaller specific area. And so he is explaining all that, and then he leaves, and I'm just frustrated, just being like, you don't understand, it's not gonna work. And so I go take a break in the lounge, and I'm there for a while, and then he is like, you know, you should get back up and paint before the light goes away. So I get up and I start working on my painting again, and I start using these these cards that it's a back of a sketchbook, so this thick cardboard that I've cut in half, so I have two pieces, and I've have a hole cut in each one of them it's about the size of the width of my pinky, and I will hold one card up and look through the hole that's on the card and look at a small area on the bottle, and then I'll do the same thing on my still life. And so doing that, comparing these two smaller parts, it just finally clicked with me with how I should be painting this bottle. So I could see the disparities, what was different, and how I could actually fix it. And so I think what I was doing wrong with this bottle is, you know, I would get the big planes, but then I would try and solve to get the dirty look to the bottle by working too big and too general. And so using the cards, after I got the big planes of the bottle, I could use the cards and work on smaller areas of the bottle and see. So I've got the big plane, work on one area of the plane and see where there are value and color shifts to show where there's a smudge or like a chunk of like dried oil in it. And it made so much sense to be able to, you know, you're just looking at the bottle, you get the big planes, and then you hold up these cardboard cards with holes cut out of them, which is so stupid and easy, but it simplifies it enough that you're just looking at this one area. You look at one small area in your painting and you just see what's different, where you could be pushing and pulling values and color, and also the edges between the values and color. I feel like this is a huge lesson that I've learned, and that it just feels like one of just another tool that I could be using to, when I have an object that is complicated, like dirty glass, and how do you paint that, or any other object that is, you know, complicated, that you get the big planes first by just looking at it and seeing the whole big impression, but then it's okay to break it down and like look at a small part here and a small part on the painting and see just how you can get the two things closer. And so Tuesday, I worked more with the cards for parts of the painting that I wasn't happy with. So I used them for the dried rose petals, the background. I did more work with the bottle and a little bit with the wood plank. But doing that and just trying to get really specific with what I'm seeing through the holes in the cards, it really helped me to see the problem that I was having, the differences, and how I could correct them. And then I finished my still life. And so Wednesday, I take everything down and I put my new objects up to start a new still life. And so I've been working on this Midas theme, and I've got a scale and a gold bowl. I gold leafed this wooden donkey, and I bought gloves, all this stuff that I wanted to have for this King Midas themed still life painting. So King Midas and his golden touch. And so I set things up, and I'm moving things around a lot. I'm putting things up and taking stuff down. And I didn't take photos of all the different variations, but I wasn't feeling that confident anymore about this still life. And I wasn't liking the composition of it. And so I tried a lot of variations, but I wasn't really liking it. So I asked Magda to come by and look at it. And she said that the gold bowl that was in the scale, she said it didn't look like metal, and which it's not. It's glass that has been gold leafed on top of that. And she said it just didn't have a metal-like appearance to it. So she said if I painted it like how it was, it might be confusing for the viewer if it didn't look like metal. And so then that made me have a lot of doubt with it. And because I felt like I could still maybe tie it together by having a really obvious title for what this means, but that I don't want, I guess, a really obvious, or I don't want a title that's telling the story of the image. I want the image to tell the story itself. So I decided to scrap the idea of King Midas, so I started just putting stuff up there again and taking stuff down. I knew I wanted to do the scale because it's a pretty awesome scale, and I just wanted to paint it. So then I put some of those bottles up again of pigments, and I thought maybe I could shoot for doing a more alchemical type of theme, which is an idea that I've had and I've been wanting to do since I started the painting program. So I started pushing more towards that, and Matt gave me a stack of books, one that's in Old Hebrew and it's falling apart, which is really cool, so I can have separate pages and a full book as well. So I kind of spread those out, and I was getting excited about doing this and saying, you know, thinking that this might work. But then my friend Lay came by and he was saying, what if I incorporated not just the top part of the still life stands, but incorporated the shelves of the still life stands and make it a vertical painting instead of a horizontal painting. And when he said that, and then I saw it, then just everything started clicking for me, and I started getting really, really excited about this. So I showed it to Matt, and he gave me even more books that I could fit into the stand. And I've just been playing around a lot with moving different objects around in it, and moving the books around in the shelf, and then the shelf that's to the left, I put another bottle of dried pigment in there and kind of pushed it back in the shadow, so hopefully you don't see it right away, but maybe if you're looking longer at the painting and kind of just looking all the way through it, you might find it. And I think that's cool that that might have another story element as well, that either it's just a bottle that was discarded for the experiment, or maybe it's kind of like a more hidden secret one, or maybe just a bottle that can't be, like, whatever materials in it can't be exposed to light or something. I don't know. But then there's all different scrolls in there. And I'm going to be moving the scrolls around too, because I bought some papyrus that I'm going to roll up and replace with, I have just some rolled up pieces of canvas. But there is one scroll that's in there that's sticking out, and I like how far it sticks out, but the bad part about that is it's catching a lot of light, and I want all of the light to be on the top part of the still life, not in those shelves. So I was trying to see if I can get a shadow to fall onto that scroll that's sticking out more, and I can't get it to fall on the scroll without it casting part of a shadow on something that I don't want it to cast on. So I'm just going to tone that down in the painting. This is a pretty cluttered still life too, so I'm really trying hard to group things together so it's easy to look at and it doesn't feel cluttered in a bad way, but cluttered in a way that it's all supporting the same theme of some type of scholarly alchemical experiment that's going on. Another interesting thing, how I had the papers set out before, they were all set out pretty flat, and Matt was saying that if you look at this painting and picture it small, like in a thumbnail, that the light shape of the papers might be a little bit confusing for what they are. So what I did then was I took papers away, so I have fewer papers, but kind of bent some of them around, so the shadow shape and light shape of the papers really helps you see that the papers are papers, because they're really thin. Oh, and then also with the scale, so with all these ideas of what could be put in the scale, whether it be money or, you know, like some sort of a material or another jar of pigments or something like that, I wasn't really loving any of these ideas because I thought it was either too on the nose or cliche, or I don't know, I just wasn't liking it. So I'm going to keep the scale empty, and I like that a lot because I think then you don't really know what this alchemist is trying to make, and so it's a little bit more ambiguous, which I think is fun. So that's it for the week. I'm super excited to get into the studio next week so I can start working on this still life. We also, at Ravenswood, got some more casts. So this is a student tutor who's my studio mate, and he's trying on one of the big casts. And also, if you want to check out my shop, which there's a link for that below in the description box, I put a lot of new available paintings up.